Hi again, everyone. Gary Digit Williams here on Beltway Boxing News and Notes on the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network. Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network can be heard on Stitcher.com, Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, as well as TuneIn. So we have a lot of places where you can hear this podcast. And, of course, not a whole lot of news this week because of what's been going on outside of our realm as far as the COVID-19 epidemic. We hope you all are staying safe, washing your hands, practicing that social distance. We hope you are staying well as also. We do have something we want to talk about. One in particular, and of course, the last couple of weeks I've been doing little tributes to Beltway boxers of the past and some of these situations around that. And I wanted originally to focus on one guy. And I thought about it and I said, well, you know, his story is wonderful, no question about it. But the story of people that surrounded him at that time is even better. And even though there are some tragedies along with this story, it's a very interesting story to talk about. I talked about it years ago, but I think it deserves an update. And for some of you, it is the first time you've heard this story. So it's in many ways, one of my favorite times in the Beltway boxing scene, because it was so unique to our scene and so unique to boxing in general. And although it did not end the way we wanted it to end, and again, some tragedy later on after that, it still was a very, very unique time in Beltway boxing history. So I want to talk about that today. Also, talk about this very ridiculous situation. I'm so angry about the situation involving a non-Beltway boxer, thank God, Billy Joe Saunders. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. We have more to talk about it as well. Beltway Boxing News and Notes on the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network, brought to you as always by Real Time Pain Relief. From boxers to ballerinas, for shoulder pain to muscle strain, everything between, Boxing on the Beltway recommends Real Time Pain Relief. Natural, plant-based, safe, fast, and effective ointment. You go to freepainoffer.com, buy $10 worth of real-time pain relief. You get a free $10 tube of real-time pain relief, the official pain relief of the 2020 Daytona 500. Rub it on. The pain is gone in real time. And by DeborahSpears.com, she has great weight loss tips, great jewelry, and great training methods. If you go to Deborah, that's Debra Spears.com. Now, before we get to all of this, I have a plug I want to get out to. I am not the podcast realm that allows me to promote other podcasts that I feel are worthy of you listening to. This is not a situation where we're competing. There's so many podcasts around the world that I feel it's okay for me to promote another person's podcast, especially if I think the podcast is good, and especially if he is a very good friend of mine. And I do consider Bruce Babashian a very good friend of mine. And because of that, he has a podcast that's underway right now called Your Corner Man. Now, if you go to his website, yourcornerman.com, he has a very, very rich life. I mean, he has been doing some amazing things. He was a competitive bodybuilder at one time. He coaches high school football in suburban Maryland. He also has been a motivational speaker for a long period of time. And of course, he's a well-known boxing trainer in the area. Among the people he trains over at Champions Boxing Gym in Rockville, Maryland, is, of course, the IBO super featherweight champion, Alexandru Marine. And he has such a wonderful history about himself, but he likes to really give out motivational and coaching tips, and has had great interviews thus far on his podcast known as Your Corner Man. That's what it's called, Your Corner Man. And it's a wonderful podcast, and it's just starting out. It's on Spotify. It's on a number of the same platforms that you can hear the Boxing on Beltway podcast, including Spotify, Google Podcasts. He's on Apple Podcasts as well. So if you have an iPhone, you can get it on Apple Podcasts as well. But his first podcast was one of the most revealing interviews that I've heard in a long time with another good friend of mine, wonderful lady, Jennifer Salinas, the Bolivian Queen. Now, apparently, I do remember this a little bit. Bruce Babashian worked with Jennifer Salinas early in her career when she came here to this area from, actually, she's from Virginia, but she lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan for a while. And and trained with the Mayweathers. Then she came back to this area, and Bruce Sebastian worked with her along with Craig Flanagan and other people worked with her along the way. Of course, she's a 2-time world champion herself. But, Bruce and Jennifer really get in some really interesting situations about Jennifer's life, and some very revealing interviews. So I suggest you really take a listen to Your Corner Man, which can be heard once again on Spotify, Google Podcasts. I believe it's on Stitcher as well. I think it will be on iHeartRadio one time at some point, but it's an Apple Podcast as well. So it's a wonderful, wonderful podcast. And by the way, coming in the near future, my partner, Juan Marshall, will have a podcast, Pro-Am Fight Talk, and that'll be on Google Podcast. I believe it's on Spotify. Right now, I think it's on Spotify and probably on other podcast networks as well. So make sure you listen to both of those. I have no cut card about that. I have no problems promoting other people's podcasts, especially if I know them, especially if I know they're going to be good, and that's what they are. All right? Now, let's get to this real quickly. This is a history of a few boxers that really threatened to set the boxing world on fire here in the Beltway. They didn't completely do that, although their start of their careers as a collaboration was phenomenal. And before we get to the collaboration itself, got to talk about one particular boxer in the four. One of the most talented boxers I ever came around when I was working my Boxing Spotlight show in the early 90s was a man by the name of Daryl Too Sweet Coley. Now, Daryl Coley was a tremendous, tremendous boxer. He really was an outstanding boxer, and he really came to prominence in the early 90s. And he fought out of Capitol Heights, Maryland. And back in August of 1993 at Prince George's Community College in Largo, Maryland, Daryl Coley fought a man who just passed away not too long ago, a great boxer by the name of Saul Mambi. And it was the restart of our Boxing Spotlight TV show. That was the first major card that we did in the reversion of Boxing Spotlight. I may have to tell the history of Boxing Spotlight one day, and I will do that at some point. But Daryl Coley fought in the main event of that show, and he knocked out Saul Mambi in the first round. Now, Saul Mambi, and I remember we interviewed him afterwards when I was on a radio show. He was on an interview with us. And Saul Mambi at that time was well over 40 years old when he fought Daryl Coley. He said he had grandkids older than Daryl Coley. So I don't know. But anyway, be that as it may. At that time, Daryl Coley was being managed by a well-known reporter at that time out of New York by the name of Michael Marley. And Michael Marley is very much involved with Don King at one time. And he managed boxers. He managed Daryl Coley. But at one point, Coley and Marley didn't really get along. So Coley, after he fought Saul Mambi, stayed on the shelf for more than a year. And it wasn't until April of 1994 that Coley got back in the ring again. He got back in the ring with a new manager by the name of Barry Lindy. Now, Barry Lindy was a well-known developer of construction. And he got into boxing. He was always boxing around gyms, working the heavy bag and so forth. And he managed Daryl Coley. He started to manage Daryl Coley. He also managed three other boxers in due time. Reggie Showtime Green, Reuben Ratman Bell, and Gary Rock Payne. And they formed the first real quote-unquote stable in this area. Maybe the most prominent one. I don't know if we've had one since then, to be perfectly honest with you. But they had a name to it. It had PR backing behind it because it had one of the well-known public relations firms here in Washington, D.C., the Brotman Winter-Fried. Actually, Charlie Brotman Promotions at that time now become Brotman Winter-Fried. The legendary Charlie Brotman leading the way, and people like Fred Sternberg and Brian Bishop who've gone on to bigger and better things since then. They were behind this group. And together they were known as the Hardcore. Now, there were other people later on who fought in the Hardcore camp, but I'm going to focus on the big four: Daryl Too Sweet Coley, Reggie Showtime Green, Ruben Ratman Bell, and Gary Rock Payne. Now, I said Lenny was a self-made millionaire. He wasn't afraid to spend that money. And they had three very wonderful trainers at that time: Leonard Langley, Al Scott, and Vardell McCann. Together they were known as the Hardcore. Now, if you want to compare that to something, my comparison always has been the comparison to the Four Horsemen stable in professional wrestling: Ric Flair, Ole and Arn Anderson, and Tully Blanchard. You know, they were the Four Horsemen. Later on, Barry Windham would come in there, and they would really be strong there. But they were the Four Horsemen of the Beltway area. And if they were the Four Horsemen of the Beltway area, then Daryl Coley was the Ric Flair of that area. He was great on the microphone. He really gave a wonderful interview. He had a lot of charisma. He was flashy. He had fast hands. He had great talent. And he was the leader, quote unquote, unofficially, of the Hardcore. Now, Ruben Bell and Daryl Coley would fight on a card on April 1st, 1994. The anniversary was on this date. As a matter of fact, on this date, 1994, April 1st. And they would fight on a card that would be promoted by a man who just passed away as well, Tom Giacomo. Tom Giacomo was one of the owners of the Palm Restaurant here in Washington, D.C. And Coley would win that fight going away. Ruben Bell would win going away. And that kind of started things for the Hardcore. That card kind of started things for the Hardcore situation. Now, Coley would go on to capture the NABF Welterweight Championship on July 5th, 1994. He scored a thrilling 11th round TKO over Terrence Ali. It was a packed house at the Washington Convention Center, nationally televised by USA Network on their Tuesday night fights. It was a tremendous win. We really thought that Coley was truly on his way to winning a world title. However, on August 12th, 1995, Coley lost that NABF title to Oba Carr in probably the most controversial decision I have ever seen in boxing as far as the Beltway is concerned. To this day, no one can convince me, some 15 years later, that Coley lost that fight to Oba Carr. Now, Oba Carr, great guy. Don't get me wrong. Wonderful boxer. He was a tremendous boxer. Nice guy, too. Met him at the Beltway Brawl. He fought on the Beltway Brawl, the Simon Brown, Vincent Peltway bout. He fought on that card. Nice guy. Really wonderful personality. But he didn't win that fight against Daryl Coley. And I think it's because Don King really wanted Oba Carr to get a world title fight, which he did. He never got a world championship, but he got that. He would get that fight over Daryl Coley. I think Daryl Coley after that was never the same. He was a very difficult fighter to watch. He became one of the little difficult to watch, and he really did not fight anywhere near the Terrence Ali fight since that fight. He did win the IBC championship one time against Floyd Williams. If you listen to my opening here, the theme song by Charles James, and what I say, it's a knockout that was a knockout against Floyd Williams. Beautiful right hand by Daryl Coley. That was a knockout of Floyd Williams that we did that we televised on Boxing Spotlight. So Coley would win the NABF title again, another thrilling contest against Kip Diggs on March 25th, 1997. In between that, he would fight some really good fights. He fought a great fight against Ray Lovato. That was on USA Network. And he would win, but only by split decision. No one understood why that was, because he really, I thought, dominated that fight against Roy Lovato. Before that fight, he would fight a guy named Jaime Rocky Balboa. We talked about him last week when we talked about his fight against Daryl Tyson. And Coley just barely won that. Actually didn't win the fight. He ended up getting a draw. And He came very close to losing that fight against Rocky Balboa. Now, Coley became the first Beltway boxer since Sugar Ray Leonard fight for $1 million purse in his battle against Oscar De La Hoya. That was on February 26, 2000 at Madison Square Garden. He started well in the bout. He really fought well, but he stopped in the 7th round in that fight against Oscar De La Hoya. He fought Oscar De La Hoya for $1 million. And then Coley finished his career with winning his last 4 bouts. He had a record of 38-2-2, 27 knockouts. Meanwhile, the second in command of the hardcore, the Tully Blanchard, as it were, would be Reggie Showtime Green. Now, Reggie Showtime Green came on like a house of fire early on in his career. He was out of Clinton, Maryland. And he would win the Maryland State Junior Welterweight title in the second of 2 contests against Lyndon Paul Walker. His first bout against Walker would be on the same card that Coley fought Saul Mambi at the Novak Fieldhouse at Prince George's Community College in Largo, Maryland. And he fight Lyndon Paul Walker. He beat him demonstrably at that second time. That was, I believe, at it was at Martin's West in Woodlawn, Maryland. And he'd win his first 16 bouts. And then Green would face Beltway boxing legend Daryl Tyson in a 12-round contest for the ABF and USBA 145-pound titles on September 20th, 1994 at DC Army. We talked about that bout last week from the Tyson angle. Green would lose that bout by a 12-round split decision. It was one of the most thrilling bouts I've ever seen in Beltway boxing history. It was nationally televised. In fact, it was on the same card as Coley fighting Rocky Balboa. Jaime Rocky Balboa was on that same card. Fantastic bout. No question about that. Now, Green would return to the DC Army. He captured the USBA title on January 31st, 1995 with a 12-round split decision win over Jaime Balboa, that same Rocky Balboa that Coley had a tough time with. He would knock Balboa down in the 12th round, and that gave him the victory in that bout. Wonderful bout. Now, when he lose another opportunity to win the NABF title, Greenwood, in the second-round knockout loss to Charles Murray on October 10th, 1995, in Murray's hometown of Rochester, New York. Green would win the NABF title eventually, unanimous decision over Ray Oliveira on August 5th, 1997, in Mashantucket, Connecticut, at the Foxwoods. Now, Green would receive his first world title shot against Beltway boxing legend Sean Bay Mitchell. Mitchell would give Green the bout on the Triple Jeopardy card at Capital One Arena on April 24th, 1999. Part of the Triple Jeopardy card, in fact, was the main event of the Triple Jeopardy card against Sean Bay Mitchell in that fight. That was Mitchell, I believe, first title defense. And Green would drop a 12-round majority decision. And that bout, I've talked about many times. I gave a whole podcast about the Triple Jeopardy card. And that was, of course, where open scoring came to fruition there. And still, Green would only lose by majority decision. His next bout would be another one that was very tough against Mickey Ward on October 1st, 1999 in Salem, New Hampshire. He would be stopped in the 10th round. They still show that particular bout on ESPN Classic every now and again. They still show that bout. It's a great bout. And Green would end his career with another world shot against IBF Junior Welterweight champion Zab Judah on January 13th, 2000, Uncasville, Connecticut. He would lose that one by 10th round TKO. He would have a record of 33-5. 15 KOs for Reggie Showtime Green. Now, you got to remember about this area at that time. This was the early 90s. We had Simon Brown as a world champion one time in the mid-80s. You had Maurice Block as a world champion at that time. And that was it, pretty much. The 90s was the revitalization of the Beltway boxing scene. Not only did you have the hardcore, but you also, of course, had William Joppy. You had Sean Bay Mitchell, who's a little ahead of everybody, because Sean Bay started early in his career. He started just before or right after his 18th birthday. So he started a little earlier than all the rest of them. But Sean Bay was there. William Joppy, Keith Holmes, Mark Johnson. All those were part of Vincent Petway in Baltimore. He had people a little behind him with Ed Griffin and Kenny Blackstone. And then you had Hasim Rahman a little bit later on. So the area was starting to bubble at that time, and really starting to bubble, and just a few years later, it would burst into the championships that we had at that time. But this was the early part of that, okay? So we talked about Reggie Green, talked about Daryl Coley. The other two, they were the Andersons of this, so to speak. And it's weird because these two would be very interesting, but they would have tragedy follow them, especially one that had a final tragedy, one had some tragedy in between. Let me talk to one that had a tragedy in between first, and that's Gary Rock Payne. Now, Gary Rock Payne, he holds a very, very big spot in my heart because he and I started together. I've kind of said that when I did my tribute to him a few years ago. He and I really started together. What I mean by that is the first Beltway boxing card I ever did play-by-play for. It wasn't even for Boxing Spotlight. It was for another show I had called Friday Night at the Fieldhouse. Gary Rock Payne was the main event on that card. And he was a great boxer. He was a outstanding amateur in the mid to late 80s. He became an alternate on the 1988 Olympic team, U.S. Olympic team. Now, I hadn't seen this many times, and I just looked it up when Daryl Tyson fought his pro debut. It was also a 6-rounder, but I had never seen one before until Gary Rock Payne. Gary Rock Payne made his pro debut on March 24th, 1990 at the Frank Williams Activity Center at Coolidge Senior High School in Washington, D.C. It was a 6-round debut against Walter Mad Dog Green. He beat Green by decision. Now, Green at that time was 6-1 with 3 KOs going into the bout. But Payne has so much amateur experience. He'd done everything just about as an amateur, short of going to the Olympics. And he did a very good job. He fought a couple times at Coolidge Senior High School. He moved slowly but steadily, but over 8 bouts, he was 6-1. He was undefeated. But then he got caught in some legal activity. He had problems legally. He had an assault charge. And the only reason I mentioned that is because he mentioned it when we did an interview with him a few years ago. We did an interview with him, and he mentioned it. We asked him not to mention it. He mentioned it anyway. So it wasn't an assault charge that he had. Now, he came back on that April 1st, 1994 card in Alexandria as part of the hardcore with Daryl Coley, Ruben Bell, and Reggie Green. Now, Payne would win the IBC Middleweight Championship on October 22nd, 1994, defeating Jeff Johnson by a 12th round decision at the Washington Convention Center. He would lose his final bout in his career. He dropped a 10-round decision to Daniel Perez on December 13th, 1994 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was 13-1 with 5 KOs. Now, Payne really, I'm not sure if he really wanted to box professionally. What happened was right before his pro debut, his brother died, Frank Jr. He passed away. And I believe he was shot. I'm not exactly sure, but I know he passed away. And that hurt Gary. And Gary lived with that really for the rest of his life. The loss of his brother. And of course his father would pass later on. But you know, he was a first class person. He and I really shared a history together we always kept for as long as I knew Gary Rock Payne. Now, the fourth person in the hardcore may have had the most talent of all of them. And I say that only because he was doing things in boxing that nobody was doing at that time. And he was a remarkable boxer by the name of Ruben Ratman Bell. Now, Ruben Bell's story is a classic case of, how can I put this? You can take a boxer out of the streets. You can't take the streets out of a boxer. And that may have been the case with Ruben Ratman Bell. Now, Bell was fighting as a junior middleweight. Now, Gary Rock Payne was a junior middleweight and then a middleweight. Daryl fought primarily his career as a welterweight, and Reggie Green fought his career as a super lightweight primarily. But again, Ruben Bell had so much potential. He was unbelievable, and he had tremendous power. He was scoring not only one-punch knockouts, he was scoring first punch knockouts. In other words, The first punch that Ruben Bell would throw, he would knock a guy out. I saw it happen a number of times in his career, his short career. Now, he was involved with a lot of crazy stuff going on in his career, in his life. It was very hard to keep him going, keep him motivated. And as he started to rise in competition, he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do outside the ring, prepared for big shots in the ring. And it cost him that. Now, in 1995, he had a 10-round bout against Paul Vaden. The winner of that bout was going to get a title shot against IBF champion Vincent Petway. By that time, he had won the world title, and he was ready to get that shot against Vincent Petway if he beat Paul Vaden. But Bell was unprepared. He did not train for that bout. Now, I know that on good authority. He did not train for that bout very well. And he still almost won the bout. That's the thing. He almost won the bout, but he just did not train well for it. And it was a 10-round decision in favor of Paul Vaden. Vaden would go on to get that title shot, and he would defeat Vincent Petway for the IBF Junior Middleweight Championship. Now, some 2 years later, September 12, 1997, at the Pikesville Armory in Pikesville, Maryland, it was a nationally televised bout. Let me rephrase that. It was a regionally televised bout, I believe. It was on what was then known as Home Team Sports. And Bell got another shot fighting former 3-time world champion and D.C. resident Simon Brown. And Brown was on the downside of career because he lost that bout to Vincent Petway at the Beltway Brawl. And many thought Bell would take care of him pretty easily. However, after the first 3 rounds, Bell was in complete control. 4th and 5th rounds, something was wrong. Bell wasn't throwing as many punches. He looked sluggish. Apparently, he had hurt his hand. At the end of the 5th round, Bell sat on the stool. He didn't get back up. The bout was over. Now, that turned out to be the last time that Ruben Bell would fight in a ring. His career ended with a record of 13-2 with 10 knockouts. So 2 losses coming to Paul Vaden and Simon Brown. Now, after the Brown bout, however, Bell was informed that he had stomach cancer. It was in his early stages, could be treated, and he went to treatment at the Washington Hospital Center here in D.C. And prognosis was becoming excellent for Bell's return to the ring, but fate played his huge hand, as you say in the old fugitive TV series. And Bell's past, again, with little been numerous run-ins with the law, ended up catching up to him. Here's what happened. A guy by the name of Tamar Locker, he apparently watched that bout on Home Team Sports against Bell and Brown, and he kept hearing Bell's nickname, Ratman, and thought it might have been the same person who organized the shooting and killing of he and his girlfriend in 1994. His girlfriend passed away. Bell was never formally charged with any involvement with this, but Locker wanted revenge. And on February 5th, 1988, when he walked in the Washington Hospital Center lobby, he saw Bell as he was waiting for his latest treatment. He opened fire on him and killed him. Locker was found not guilty by reason of insanity for killing Ruben Bell. And Ruben Bell had died at the age of just 24 years of age. And that was a big tragedy that started everything going with the hardcore. It was a terrible situation. But again, he couldn't get away from the street situation that he was involved with, and it cost him his life. No question about it. It cost him his life. His legacy kind of lived on in his 2 nephews, Jason and Justin Bell, who I believe are living out of the Beltway now, but they've kind of tried to live up to Ruben's legacy. I've talked to his sister, Ruben's sister, I should say, and she's very proud of her twin boys. So the hardcore ended up having 3 NABF titles, 2 for Coley, 1 for Green, 2 IBC titles, Coley and Payne, and the group broke up in the midst of inability to move successfully to the championship level. They had a couple title shots, especially Green and Coley, but that was it. And that was the end of the hardcore. 1988 was pretty much the end of the hardcore right there. I don't know, even though Reggie Green and Daryl Coley fought into the early 2000s. The group as a whole did not reach the success that that people thought they would have. And it was a very interesting time, a very great time at some points, and then other points just not where we wanted it to end. Since that time, of course, Gary Rock Payne, as I kind of alluded to, he passed away at the age of 47 back in 2016. Al Scott, one of the trainers, passed away in 2012. Another one of the trainers, Vardell McCann, passed away in 2013. Leonard Langley, the third trainer, is doing very well. He lives, I believe, in Delaware. And Delaware, Pennsylvania, I think it's Delaware. And he's doing well. He's kind of training boxers up there. And I see him periodically. Very great guy. We talk of old times all the time when we see each other, because he was a wonderful person. I don't know what happened to Barry Lindy, perfectly honest with you. I have not heard his name. I know he has not passed, but I don't know whatever happened to him after that. A couple people worked PR for them. Fred Sternberg is a well-known PR person. He once worked for America Presents, and now I believe he's working. I think he works for Top Rank, but I'm not sure. I have to double check that. And Brian Bishop, the other person, does a lot of PR work around the city. I ran into him recently. We were doing work at the Entertainment and Sports Arena for the Capital City Go-Go, and I think in a couple of the college tournaments that I did, recent Holiday Hoops Fest. During that time. So, for me, it was a very good time to get my feet back into the boxing game at that time. I was not completely out of it, 'cause I was still working for Fight News, but I started working for Fight News that time, but really it was a great time as far as Boxing Spotlight is concerned. It really helped elevate what we were doing, because we had the talent to show on a weekly basis, and the hardcore was a major part of that talent. So that's my tribute to the hardcore. Wonderful group of guys that, unfortunately, although, Coley and Green doing well in their post lives, we lost Ruben Bell, Gary Rock Payne, but still a wonderful time for Beltway boxing that time. Now, finally, I don't talk a lot about what's going on outside the Beltway scene, but this situation involving Billy Joe Saunders has got me so angry right now, because it just makes no sense for him to do this on the eve of what could have been, if the virus wasn't around, the biggest fight of his career. He was scheduled to take on one Saul Canelo Alvarez at some point, and he blew that. And he blew that because he thought it was a joke to talk about being involved, being a stay-at-home order in England, and being so angry about your girlfriend, your wife, that you want to learn how to hit them. And that's what he posted a video about how to hit a woman, during this time. And it was just stupid. In this day and age especially, why would you do something that stupid? It cost him everything. Now, I've never been a big Billy Joe Saunders fan to begin with. Quite frankly, I think he's a coward, because he turned down fights that would come back later on and say, "Oh, I could have won that fight. Yeah, I could have beat that guy." No, then take the fight. He didn't want to take the fight, and it's ridiculous. And I never really thought much of him to begin with. But this whole thing involving this Twitter that he wanted to say was a joke, and he said he was sorry. He was sorry that he got called on it. That's what it was. And it was just one of the most reprehensible things I've ever seen in boxing. And he's lost his license, thank goodness. He's been suspended. The British Boxing Board of Control suspended him. I believe it's indefinitely. And he's suspended in California. He got to be suspended elsewhere in the world. And it was just ridiculous. And I'm glad to see everybody leap on him and talk about how ridiculous it was. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I get too angry talking about these things, to be perfectly honest with you. But that'll do it here for another edition of Beltway Boxing News and Notes on the Boxing Beltway Podcast Network. Again, we don't have a lot of news, of course, for obvious reasons. So we're trying to do more tributes to some of the legendary Beltway boxers of the past. By the way, I do want to mention this. Getting back to hardcore real quickly, Daryl Coley and Reggie Showtime Green went into the DC Boxing Hall of Fame together in 2014. I believe Leonard Langley's also in the Hall of Fame, maybe even Vardell McCann, I'm not sure, but definitely Daryl Coley and Reggie Green are in the DC Boxing Hall of Fame. They went in 2014 together. So it was a great time, no question about that. Beltway Boxing News and Notes on the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network, once again brought to you by Real Time Pain Relief. Go to freepainoffer.com, buy $10 worth of Real Time Pain Relief. You get a free $10 tube of Real Time Pain Relief, the official pain relief for the 2020 Daytona 500. Rub it on, the pain is gone in real time. And by DeborahSpears.com, great weight loss tips, great jewelry, great training methods on Deborah, Debra Spears.com. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane, and we'll have more for you as long as we have no boxing to talk about. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gary Digital Williams. Mind you, as always, keep supporting the best boxing in the world, the boxing along the Beltway. Thanks for listening. Take care.